All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to Discipline Before Dishonor. So I'm going to get right into it. I made a Reddit post on the Change My View forum, but it was immediately flagged and removed by Reddit's filters, as you can see down here. Now, I wanted to talk to you about why this might have been flagged by the filters and what that means in the broader sense for society at large, and we'll get into a little bit of a discussion about the echo chambers that some people find themselves in, and why I think it's dangerous for social media to do that to people. So we'll start with the brass tacks, the post itself. This is what I posted. Change my view. The people who said Charlie Kirk deserved to get shot were the same people saying the unvaccinated deserved to be fired. Okay, that's a loaded statement in and of itself, but let's elaborate with my reasoning. Quote, unquote, freedom of choice does not mean freedom from consequences, is the typical talking point. Sure, if you walk up to your boss and call her a bitch, then you're probably getting fired. Nobody would really cross that line unless they wanted to lose their job. That's fair, right? And that's because you don't really have freedom of speech where an employer is concerned. That's a private contract between you and them, and if you fuck around, you're going to find out. It's fair. It's fair. But some people are trying to attach that same logic to Charlie getting shot, basically saying if he didn't want to get shot, then he would not have shared such controversial opinions. And I feel like the moral disconnect required to come to that conclusion is in the same vein as those who advocated for firing every unvaccinated person during the pandemic, even though that rationale clearly violated the Nuremberg Code and was akin to genuine Nazism. Now that word gets thrown around a lot falsely, right? It gets attributed to things that are so far removed from Nazism, it lends comedy to the phrase. But in this particular context, it's right on the nose. It's not a misnomer, it's not a misuse of the phrase, it is a genuine attribution, verifiable by fact, right? It's this radical comply or die way of thinking typically found on the left side of the political spectrum, and honestly, I'm sick of seeing it. It's also worth noting that the people who cheered on Charlie's shooting were using misinformation to do it. They never actually watched his videos or clips, at least not any that weren't intentionally curated to deliver a false narrative through cherry-picked phrases taken out of context. And I feel that parallels well with the way the left obfuscated the entire narrative around vaccines during the pandemic. You could talk about the fact that vaccines had experimental technology in them. The lack of informed consent, which violated the Nuremberg Code. You could also talk about the fact that the vaccines only had emergency use authorization rather than full-fledged approval by the FDA. Until you were blue in the face, you could talk about all these things. Yet all the left would do, just like the Charlie Kirk assassination, was cherry-pick a few contexts to try and demonize you, and repeat those talking points until in their minds, you were akin to a devil and it was justified to take all of your civil liberties away. Talking points like, you're killing grandma, or you're just another science-denying anti-vaxxer. I'm sure we heard those a lot ourselves, right? I sure did. Firing everybody for refusing vaccination was draconian and inhuman, and everybody celebrating it was engaging in willful evil, akin to everybody who celebrated Charlie Kirk's unfortunate demise. The tie that binds both events was this: the radical left despising civil liberties and wanting people to have those liberties taken away. Bodily autonomy in one context and free speech in the other. So the question is, why is the left such a mirror to fascist ideology? Why do they fight for the rights of oppressed minorities on the surface, yet so readily belittle and bemoan and try to steal the rights of the majority of humans during times of crisis? Change my view. Convince me of otherwise. Now, unfortunately, nobody on Reddit's going to have the opportunity to convince me of otherwise, because Reddit did not allow for continued discussion on the matter. They removed it, right? Likely several flagged terms that are not allowed, but this is the problem of radicalization, and I think it's something we should at least talk about briefly. When you censor somebody's ability to debate something or discuss something or talk about something, you actually radicalize them further into their point of view, because you're not allowing anybody to present any counterpoints to it. You're not allowing reasonable consensus to be acquired, which I believe leads to further extents of unreasonable radicalization, right? And it's so important to recognize that the pandemic, we know that it leaked from a lab. Everybody who tried to say that was labeled a racist, right? And the misuse and weaponization of information lately in recent generations, it paints a picture of almost deliberate division, right? Asmongold once said that most of the things that we fight about are meant to distract us from the reality, the singular reality of class warfare. It's rich versus poor. It always has been, right? It's the landowners versus those who rent. It's ultimately just a perpetual power struggle, but the rich own the media. So through media indoctrinations on social media and mainstream media, they divide us, right? They get us fighting over trans rights. They get us fighting over vaccine status. They get us fighting over race issues. They get us fighting over everything except the economic disparities where the powerful compound their power at the expense of the middle class, right? And I think that's very important to talk about. So I'd like to just open this topic up to you guys for general discussion down in the comments and in your own personal lives. I'd like to bring it to the forefront of your attention so that maybe you can start, mulling it over a little deeper, thinking about it more in a directed manner, talking to your family and friends about it if they'll have such conversations with you without freaking out. Another thing that I want to get you guys talking about is the notion of radicalization and how, unfortunately, spaces like Reddit, the way that they censor a lot of discussions and a lot of perspectives, creates echo chambers, which cause radicalization like a festering wound, right? It is no surprise that we have radical Democrats these days. The reason why is because they have quote-unquote safe spaces where contrary opinions are not allowed to be spoken. So in a sense, websites like Reddit have forsaken the concept of a town square meant to challenge everybody's beliefs and bring them closer to unity in favor of coddling the beliefs of the emotionally unstable into ever-increasing extents of emotional volatility and, debatably, even behavioral volatility, creating extremism, right? We have to wonder if there would be as many trans people shooting up schools or as many people... Well, Donald Trump had 2 attempts on his life taken, right? And Charlie Kirk was recently killed. So we have to ask ourselves if all of this radicalization would be possible, if all of these horrendous behaviors would be occurring without the existence of enabling echo chambers, right? And in my view, websites like YouTube should not have a terms of service. They shouldn't. YouTube receives certain, Section 230, something like that, protections where they can't be held liable for copyright infringement because they are technically, on paper, a platform, not a publisher, right? So everything that happens on the platform, they are immune to copyright violations. But you become a publisher and stop being a platform when you begin to enforce arbitrary rules based on what people can and can't say, and based on what is and is not the accepted narrative of the time. Right now, the unfortunate reality is that Reddit doesn't need to be held accountable to copyright infringement because most of what you find here is personal opinions. You're not going to find clips of popular movies or songs here, right? But I feel like that's the issue. I feel like that's the problem. I feel like in order for Reddit to be a respected social media platform, it would have to be just that. It would have to stop serving the duty of a publisher, and it would have to allow a town square environment where what Charlie Kirk was trying to do and unfortunately got killed doing at universities and college campuses, we would be able to do online without fearing that we would lose our jobs, without fearing that we would be doxxed, without fearing that we might be killed for our opinions, I feel there is a strong requirement for us as the younger generations now to really push our legislators and our political powers that be, yes, the same ones I was just talking about with the class warfare, I haven't forgotten, but we need to pressure them into creating an environment where we can discuss things freely. We need to legislate social media companies such as Reddit to be held accountable to the standard of free speech, because when you take that away, you create echo chambers, which in turn creates the festering wound of radicalization, especially in youths, right? Kids from broken homes absorb this shit, they lap it up, right? So I think we need to direct our energies there. And I'll never forget, we still don't know who was on Epstein's list. It could be some of them, it could be all of them. We could be being ruled by psychopaths who play the part and, we'll not forget that. We won't forget that the ruling class could be a hive of corruption, right? But unfortunately, this is the system that we have, and we do have to work with it. We do have the rulers that we have, and they are susceptible to appeals to authority. We can get them to do things that would benefit us, right? And I think that it's important that we work within the framework of the system that we currently have, instead of, you know, this Antifa method of like, oh my God, kill them all, etc., etc. That's not going to do anything good, right? What we need to do is we need to lay the building blocks now and stop this hate speech shit that Pam Bondi's been talking about, right? We need to nip that in the bud, because where it leads is a situation where people who do what Charlie Kirk have done are not allowed to continue to do it. They're not allowed to talk to people. They're not allowed to engage in open, free discussion. They're not allowed to discuss the Epstein list, economic disparity, the social conditions that create crime. They're not allowed to discuss the potential risks of experimental medications as per the pandemic. We don't want to create an environment where that's not allowed, right? We want to create an environment where this post does not get removed by Reddit's filters. We want to create an environment where we can openly discuss these things, because the simple act of being able to discuss these things creates a level of accountability in our rulers. If we can discuss their corruption openly, if we can discuss the politicization of the vaccine mandates openly, if we can discuss Charlie Kirk's murder openly, then we create a system where the powers that be are accountable to a higher standard. Because what happens if we start talking about how they betrayed their duty? Well, exactly. We hold them accountable. If we're allowed to talk about the accountability of those in power, then as a result, they must endure the burden of greater accountability, greater self-responsibility in the face of all that power that they wield, right? So I just thought I would make this video in the hopes that YouTube allows it, in the hopes that, unlike Reddit, YouTube decides to be a platform and not a publisher, that it does not try to enforce arbitrary rulings. We recently found out that Biden colluded with YouTube, had a whole bunch of accounts deleted and a bunch of content censored during pandemic era times, and likely beyond that too. So I feel that this is the tipping point, not only for the USA, but for the social media ecosystem at large. And I feel like what happened to Charlie Kirk and the pandemic in recent memory are signs of what might come if we don't diligently direct our attention where it needs to be and advocate for the ethics and civil liberties that we would like to preserve against the tide of dark forces in the world who would seek to take them away. So let's do just that. Discuss it with your friends, discuss it with your family members, even perhaps especially with the ones who would disagree with these notions, right? And try to make public discourse great again, as they say. Anyway, take care, rock on, and peace out for now, my friends. I've appreciated your company. I hope you've appreciated the discussion, and I look forward to seeing some of you in stream today. Later.